I don't want you to worry. You don't need to worry because the decision's already been made. Good morning, and welcome back to another edition of Fundamentals of Parenting. I'm Jaime Buckley, and your children are always watching you, even when you think they aren't. The most powerful thing you can do is lead by example. Now, when I started this season with Discovering Your Parenting Why, I mentioned that knowing your why was one of, if not the most critical aspect of our parenting foundation. Because knowing why you do something helps clarify other aspects of our lives. It empowers us in so many ways, the most helpful, in my opinion, being that when you are faced with a hard choice, the decision has already been made. You don't have to weigh and consider your options in most instances because the very principles you live by will provide the answers for you. Now, there was a time when our older children had hit their teen years, and we found ourselves nestled in this neighborhood, surrounded by all these families that I wasn't impressed with. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't me trying to judge other people. It sure sounds that way, but it's my nature to take a step back and let people prove to me who they are by what they do. I don't step in and say, oh, that guy looks like a jerk. They even could be acting in such a way, but I don't know what has prompted that. I don't know what's caused that. So I like to take a step back. I think it's better to think the best of others until they prove you wrong. And frankly, it makes for a more enjoyable life. That being said, we didn't have good neighbors. Children ran about having no regard for others. And this is all while parents are looking on or ignoring things, ignoring irresponsible behaviors. And I heard the phrase often, kids will be kids. Yeah, sure, kids will be kids unless you teach them to be something else. Anyway, I digress. When kids will be kids, someone is likely to get hurt. Now, which parent gets mad in those situations depends on who gets hurt. And this time it wasn't one of mine. My neighbor came to my front yard screaming like a banshee. The man insisted on punishing my son for the brutality shown towards his son, who was a head taller, 2 years older, and at least 50 pounds heavier than my child, to the ground. My kid had shoved the big kid to the ground. He wagged his finger at us, the father, while coddling his own son, which didn't surprise me. But the accusations rolled off his tongue faster than a politician's promises before an election. For a parent who didn't witness the supposed offense firsthand, he was absolutely certain about every fact, including my child's intent. Right. So it came as a shock to my son when I turned to him and I said, I'd like you to apologize for your part in this. My boy looked at me as like I'd slapped him in the face, and he whispered, whose side are you on, Dad? Here's the why. Years before my son had been born, I pondered what kind of father I wanted to be. What type of example I wanted to set for my sons and daughters. It was important for me to be the kind of man that they could look up to, and that when they did, they would learn through my example why they should do the same. Part of that was striving to be a person who lived by principle and not being swayed by personalities, regardless of who the people were, including my children. The most important thing I wanted my children to see was that I was striving to be an honest father, and if they were striving to do the right thing for the right reasons, I'd always have their back. It was important for my son to apologize, not because he was wrong, but because it was a peacemaking gesture, regardless of who was at fault in this instance. It was an offering to soothe the situation so we could get to the truth. I have to say I was impressed with the tone of my son as he apologized. And he was very kind to the neighbors. I was even more impressed that he exerted his trust in me, because it paid off. Turns out the reason my son had pushed the neighbor's kid was because he, the neighbor kid, had pushed my daughter, who was half his age and half his size. And she was inside being attended to by my wife, and I had not yet connected the two until my son had spoken up. Now, the last thing I want to do is give you the impression that I'm always the calm and collected type, because I'm not. I just want all the facts before I let the meaner version out of the closet to deal with those who won't communicate through reason. Since I'd already made the decision to defend my children from threats, I then explained to my neighbor, while staring solely at his son the whole time, that if this boy ever laid a finger on my daughter or any of my children again, my son would have permission to push back as needed. When I looked up to meet the man's eyes, his anger had turned to confusion. "It's sad that you allow your son to harm little girls," I said to him softly, "and defending that kind of behavior in your child makes me wonder what kind of a person you really are." We never had another problem with the neighbors. The how. All this comes back to looking into your why, taking the time to decide ahead of time what kind of person you are choosing to be before the trials. This is before the challenges, before all the variables hit you in the face, because they will. They're coming. It's part of being a parent. Not everything will be solved this way, but you will be pleasantly surprised at how many situations will fall from your shoulders because you just don't have to think about it. The decision has already been made. Conclusion. This is all about choice. It always is. Choose to be a certain kind of parent. Choose to act in a certain way, in certain circumstances. Choose to think through what you feel will be the most challenging aspects of parenting, and choose how you will address the situation ahead of time. Choose to be the very best parent you know how to be. Then choose to improve upon that as you gain more knowledge and experience. Choose to become more than you think you are. Now, what to do next? Now that you know it's both possible and wise to make decisions ahead of time, here's what you might consider. Think about situations you may be forced to deal with as a parent. Things that make you really uncomfortable. Things that scare you, or things that might not have a great deal, things that you might not have a great deal of control over. Then think through the scenarios in your mind and decide ahead of time how you will deal with the situations with the focus on a best win-win outcome. How will you speak? How will you carry yourself? How will you respond to others if others are angry or unkind? Once you've chosen, let it all go. The decisions have already been made. You've got this. And that's another fundamentals of parenting. I'm glad we had this short time together, and if you know of anyone who could use this information, use this help and this encouragement, I'd like to ask you to think of 2 to 3 people that could use this and share it with them. Let them know about our podcast, let them know about our videos, and let them know about our blog. And you have a great day. We'll see you next time.